Welcome to Stranger Encounters, episode 16. I am Tommy Salmons. Today's guest is Michael Korbel, a prosperity coach. In this episode, we discuss growing up blue collar and moving into finance, communicating with people as a coach, identifying why people make decisions, how to define your why, accepting individual responsibility and the role of family, the power of technology and how it's changing business, the Federal Reserve, how money works and financial education, and the Rule of 72. Michael was a good guest to have on, and I hope y'all enjoy listening to this as much as I enjoyed talking to him. Let's go ahead and get rolling. I definitely want to go. I'm going to give you a chance to tell your story. So I really like to hear where you come from and what you do now, Michael.
All right. Well, I live in the suburbs of Chicago, Illinois, and I call myself a prosperity coach. What that really means is I teach people how to become free through their own savings and going after whatever their dreams are. I don't have an extraordinary background. I was pretty much just a middle-class suburbanite. I went to high school just like your regular white folks did in their suburbs, and I ended up just getting into a blue-collar job. I actually got into heating and air conditioning because I didn't know what else to do. Started my career when I saw an ad in the paper, and it said, if you can turn a screwdriver, you can work for us. So I figured, well, that's probably easy enough to turn a screwdriver, so I figured out how to do that. Found myself in a job, actually. Originally, what we were doing is changing air filters, the ones that you see in air conditionings and furnaces, but it was all for commercial jobs.
Oh, okay.
And so what I did is a friend of mine named Ray, he was the manager of the place, and I came in there, and I probably looked like a punk to him at the time because at that point in time, it was like 1998, 1999. I was just a couple of years out of high school, and I actually had dyed black hair. I was kind of in the grunge phase, maybe goth, you might have labeled it as. So I was probably just kind of a punky kid, but I said, I can turn a screwdriver, so let's go to work. So Ray hired me as the manager, and him and I actually drove around Chicagoland, and our job was to get on the rooftops of buildings, like all your local grocery stores or some of the other commercial buildings, and we literally just pulled out the dirty air filters from those machines and put new ones in. It was about as simple as you can actually ask for a job. And I did that for about 5 years. And the funny thing is that Ray was he came from a background kind of similar to mine, although he was a high school dropout and just kind of found his way into the company. And then we met. We became friends. Actually, still lifelong friends. Here it is 20 years later. But we would go around and just, do whatever, just kind of goof around and change filters. And I started looking at air conditioning equipment, and I was like, wow, this is kind of cool stuff. I like to learn this kind of stuff. So real long story made short, I actually ended up getting interested in the heating and air conditioning. And I eventually went to school to become an HVAC technician because I figured they paid a lot more to actually work on the equipment than I was making just changing air filters.
Yeah.
So I took a loan out. I became a heating and air conditioning technician, and I got the trade certificate, and I started working for a local shop. And now, instead of just going on the rooftops, I was also going into people's houses. So, I grew up as blue collar as you can get and just learned a trade. It wasn't until probably 3 years into it that I started joining a union and I understood the world of politics when it comes to union trades and a whole bunch of other things.
And how did you become a prosperity coach? And when you say prosperity coach, are you talking like similar to like a Dave Ramsey type of system that you help people with, or how did that all come about, and what exactly is it?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I mean, I don't want to drone on too long about what I did prior to this.
Hey, I'm featuring you here. You can talk as long as you want. The less people hear from me, the better off they're probably going to be happier,
So after about 5 years in heating and air conditioning and in the union, we actually one thing that scared me about the heating and air conditioning trade was I was probably at this point now 28, 29, and in our trade school, we actually had to go to a place that was like an hour away from where I was actually working. And so I had to fight the Chicagoland traffic just to get to the school. But here I was, 28, 29 years old, and I saw these people who are close to my age now in their 40s. And they looked like their backs were broken and their bodies were all scuffed up, and they just looked miserable. And it scared me to death. I thought, I don't really want to have the next 20 years or more in a trade, and I end up looking like these guys who are all sad and pathetic. So actually, about the same time, a friend of mine, he actually I got to know him through my church, and he knew that I was miserable with my job. And he knew something I didn't really want to fully admit, because I had spent a good majority of my life putting together my career in blue-collar world and learning a trade. But he knew I was very friendly, very open talking to people. He knew that I didn't really have many fears as far as talking to strangers or just being a sociable, likable guy. He came up to me one day and he said, "Mike, you're wasting your talent in heating and air conditioning." It was actually a bold move for him to say that. I thought it was unique, though. So I was like, well, what do you mean I'm wasting my talent? So he gave me a simple challenge. He said, just come to my office and take a look at what I'm doing. And that was like a life-changing experience for me. So here I am, as blue-collar as you can get. You know, I carried a toolbox for a living, and yeah, I might have wore a tie once in a while if I went to church or something, but I would not call myself a white-collar professional in any stretch of the imagination. But I went to this office, and I saw a bunch of people who seemed to be happy. They weren't miserable like I saw at the union school. They were happy. They were smiling. They looked good. You know, a lot of them wearing suits and ties and just dressed professional. And I was really curious as to what they were doing. And what they were doing is just helping average people figure out how to make their lives better by understanding the money game. And that's really the beginning of my whole professional career. The company that I started working for has a motto of no family left behind, and their whole reason and purpose for existence is to teach middle American families how to do better things with their money so they can go after what they really want in life. So when I started doing that, Frank said, listen, you know, you don't have any experience in financial services or anything like that. You know, I understand that you're probably not an expert in money, but you don't need to be. Really what it was, hey, just make an introduction. You go out there and do what you got to do, and you can just introduce me to people. And that was it. So I would go back to my trade, and I'd talk to people I'm working with or people I encounter and just have friendly conversations. And I'd find out that they were in debt, or they had kids that they wanted to send to college, or they just didn't know how to make ends meet. And I say, you got to talk to this guy I'm working with, and he'll help you out. What was great was, if anything transpired from that I would get paid half of whatever was written up. So, for example, it was in insurance, it was in securities and investments, and I didn't have to actually do the work or be the consultant. I just introduced him to my friend, and he would call me in the middle of the day and say, "Hey, Mike, you just made $300. You just made $500. You know, sometimes I make $1,000." And I was like, that's awesome. So I started making more money doing that on a part-time basis, just referring people to my friend. It wasn't long before I said, I got to get out of heating and air conditioning and learn how to do this more full-time. Right.
And so now that you're doing it full-time, and now that you're focusing on being a prosperity coach, what exactly do you do with people? Do you give them investment advice, or do you teach them how to manage money better, or what exactly is it that you're doing?
So it's a little bit of everything. I call myself a prosperity coach because if I went around and told people I was a financial planner, they'd probably run away from me. Most people don't like financial planners, or they have one that they already are working with, or they feel that they just are not in the position to actually sit down with somebody. And so, yeah, by the legal definition, you can call me a financial professional. I do hold an insurance license. I do hold I'm a registered rep, which means I can work with mutual funds and variable products, things of that nature. But I like the word prosperity coach because really my job is just to teach people how to go after what they want most in life. So I'll sit down with you, and we have a 6-step process. We teach people how to just put more cash in their pocket. I can teach somebody 14 different ways to actually put more cash in their pocket without actually having to work overtime.
Oh, really?
We also tell people, yeah, absolutely. And I can teach people how to get out of debt, how to pay off their debts. You mentioned Dave Ramsey before. A lot of people are familiar with the Dave Ramsey debt strategy. And, I'm not going to lie, we teach a similar principle and, show somebody how to pay off their debts logically and in about half the time they normally would. But then on the investment side, just having people set up an emergency fund, having people put money away for a rainy day so they're not pulling out their credit cards if they get into a car wreck or if the appliance goes on their fridge or something like that. But also we're looking at insurances. We're looking at sitting down and have somebody protect their assets, have somebody protect the breadwinner. So in case anything happens to him or her, the family doesn't have to change their lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, includes college planning, your long-term asset accumulation, so your retirement and just preserving your wealth, your estate. And so, by law, I would say it is financial planning what I do, but we also have a unique system where I can bring somebody into my company and say, listen, you just keep doing what you're doing. Like I was brought in as a heating and air conditioning representative. Mm-hmm. And say, listen, what if I can show you how to make a couple extra $1,000 a month and not turn it into a career or anything? I don't want to make you something that you want to be, but would it help if you had an extra couple $1,000 every single month? Would it help your budget? And so it's I just love what I do because it really helps people take control of their own lives through the monetary system.
Yeah, and it's very apparent that you do love what you do. I watch you post videos on Facebook every once in a while, and I'll watch them. I think I've noticed that you might have one going up every week or something like that, and I'll watch them. And you're very optimistic, and that was part of the reason I wanted to get you on here is because you're very optimistic, and you're like, hey man, let me help you reach your dreams, and let me help you achieve your goals, and this, that, and the other. And I love that. I mean, that's what this podcast is about. It's helping. And I really wanted to give a place for young people to come and listen and say, hey, look, man, I can learn these experiences from these people that have done these things, and taken like you did, taking different paths to reach different levels of success and create careers for themselves and retirement and this, that, and the other. One of the things that I find interesting, and I talked to, I don't know if you know who Kylan Ginger is, but I talked to Kylan Ginger about it, and I'd also talked to Stephen Worley about it, and I listened to Jason Stapleton, and he talks about it a lot. And it's you have to learn to look at money differently. Like people have the wrong idea of money. And I think that the way that people view money creates a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress because they look at money as a resource, like oxygen or this, that, and the other. But when you start viewing money as a commodity, that it takes a lot of that pressure off of you, and you learn to, as was stated in The Richest Man in Babylon, you learn to enslave your money instead of having your money enslave you. Is there a process that you go through working with people on how they view money and how they talk about money?
Well, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. There's an author by the name of T. Harv Eker, and he talks about what people think about money. And I can't remember the name of his book right offhand. But, people will sit there and they'll say that the money is the root of all evil, right? Which is actually, if you're looking into scriptures, that's actually not even a correct translation of the scriptures. It's the love of money, which is the root of all evil, right? So people will sit there and think that money causes evil, and the very wealthy people are somehow bad, and somehow it's wrong to have money. And it is a resource. In the fact that here's another author, Zig Ziglar. You might have heard of him. Mm-hmm. He said that money is not the most important thing, but it's right up there with oxygen as I gotta have it kind of thing.
Right.
And so the way people think about money is really what I believe puts them in the position that they're at. If you look at wealthy people and you think that somehow that they're bad, then of course you got no chance to ever be wealthy, because it's already predisposed in your mind that, oh, well, I don't want to be that because, that's bad. On the other hand, I think that a lack of money causes a lot of crime and a lot of things that's going on, because people do know and recognize that money is important and they have to survive, especially in today's world. It should not be the most important priority in your life. It shouldn't be all you think about, but it's definitely a factor. And one of my mentors said that money just simply makes you more of what you already are. So if you're a jerk and you have a lot of money, then you're just a jerk with a lot of money. If you're not a jerk, well, then you could have money and it wouldn't affect it. Or if you're kind and you're generous and you're charitable, then having more money will just enhance and increase those things.
Well, I want to dig into something you just said a second ago, and it's just a slight pushback, and I just want to see what you think about this. And this is completely anecdotal, so because I'm speaking from my own experiences. So keep that. That's kind of like my little, hashtag there. Just like keep that in mind that this is a completely anecdotal thing. All right. So I had a rough life. All right, and absolutely a lot of the things that happened in my life, especially after I was through high school, were results of decisions I made. So I didn't always make the best decision. I'm completely aware of that, and I'll be the first one to admit it, right? But I had a family very young, and I always struggled with money. And then when I was in the military, my first wife divorced me, and I got married again, and I had 2 kids with her. All right, so I was paying my child support to my first wife, and then I was raising 2 other kids. And I had another wife that was not, most of the time she didn't work. Okay. So I started driving a truck. I guess I was 23 years old. I had gotten out of the military. I started driving a truck, after 8 months of being out of work, looking for a job, working 14 hours a week at Randall's, a couple hours here, painting this house for this person, doing this, just doing random stuff, just to try to keep my head above water, living on a friend's couch and this, that, and the other. Okay. So whenever you say that the lack of money has something to do with crime, I kind of step back and say, well, I see where you're coming from, and maybe because my experiences are a little different than yours, and you haven't experienced living on $100 a week or whatever, maybe you don't see it in exactly the same way I do. But one thing I would change about that statement is it's the lack of money, and then the lack of future vision combined. It's not one or the other. It's a combination of the two. If you have no money today and you never see it ever getting better, that can lead you down to the path of crime. But if you're surrounded by the right people, you're putting the right things in your mind, you're listening to the right things, you're reading the right things, and you keep that vision of one of these days, I'm going to get there, 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 that as long as you have something to work towards, that you're much less likely to get caught up in the crime that is associated with the poorer communities in the United States. And I had quite an influence when it came to this. My mom got pregnant with me when she was 16 years old. She dropped out of high school. She was already going to like a 3rd-tier high school as it was in Reeves, Louisiana. It's not known for its, turning out of geniuses. But she dropped out of high school, never got a GED, never got a high school diploma, never went to college, right? But what she did do is she got a job in a mailroom for an insurance, workman's comp insurance company in Dallas. And she busted her butt constantly. My dad was working 3 jobs. He was working construction and retail. And my mom was working 50 hours a week, coming and picking my brother from daycare, bringing us home, putting food on our table. She'd go 3-4 days without eating at times because we didn't have the money or the resources for her to actually eat. But what ended up happening is because my mom kept seeing the opportunities to advance within her company. Here we are, 30 some odd years later. My mom makes 6 figures a year, and she's known in Texas as one of the top workman's comp claims adjusters in America. And she does risk management for a company nowadays. And she's in charge of the entire risk management department. So when you grow up with that kind of like figure in your life, and I love my mom to death. Me and her are like best friends because of she always says that we raised each other because we're so close together in age. She's only 16 years older than me. So when you grow up with that kind of figure in your life and showing you that no matter what obstacle gets put in your way, you can still take that step forward, you always have that hope that you're going to accomplish something. I think a lot of these people, the crime is caused because you've taken away their financial resources and you've taken away their hope. Does that make any sense to you?
Absolutely. In fact, I didn't want to be put in a box by saying that lack of money causes all crime. Definitely not. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's hope. Hope is probably the most powerful in the formula, if you would say that. Definitely the associations that you have, the hope that you have, whether it's faith-based hope or just hope because you see opportunity in front of you, and there's certainly. I'm not a criminal psychologist, so I can't sit there and attribute every reason why people go to crime as to what that is. I just because there are certainly wealthy people who commit crimes, so it's really greed and lack of civility above everything else. But what I think what is interesting, and thank you for sharing your story, because in my line of work, I see people from all different backgrounds, and I'm actually still thinking about, you mentioned Jason Stapleton. One of the things that he'd said in one of his interviews was that sometimes people in middle America who really have average lives and really aren't really poor and aren't really wealthy, they have the most difficult time putting themselves up in a higher plateau, if you would, because people who come from very desperate backgrounds, people who have virtually nothing or have had horrible experiences in their life, a lot of times they see themselves as, I want to get out of this situation, so they push even a little harder to get to that better life, where somebody in the middle America would just be like, I'm just kind of safe here, I'm not too warm, not too cold, and it's more of a comfort thing, right? Mm-hmm. So, but it is basically the mindset, and that's really what I'm all about with my videos and the things I put on social media is the power of our mind determines the outcome of our life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would imagine that in your field, by being a prosperity coach, you have to do a certain amount, and maybe you don't, maybe you have this natural talent, but I would imagine that you have to do a certain amount of study on psychology and how the mind works and how to communicate better with people and how to really expose people to the possibilities that their life holds for them.
Absolutely. Being a coach means that you got to lead people to make decisions that they wouldn't normally do. And I've seen people from all different backgrounds who become ultra successful. Certainly, there are way more successful people than me in my life, and I'm constantly trying to study their behaviors. And they say that human nature is in everything that you do. Human nature is either working for you or against you at all times. And so, yeah, I mean, not just in the financial industry, but just in sales and I think in success in general, just understanding how people behave, what drives them to make decisions. If you're in sales for anything, whether you're selling automobiles or you're selling like life insurance, or you're selling anything, people make decisions based on their emotions. And if you understand why they make these emotions and what their human nature is all about, then that'll put you in a better place.
Yeah, well, and one of the things that I've been studying lately, and this kind of ties in with the whole psychology and the coaching and everything, is I've been studying Simon Sinek and the speeches he's been giving on the golden circle and on the infinite game versus the finite game and this, that, and the other. Are you familiar with Simon Sinek?
Sure, I've seen his TED Talk Start with Why, and then I also read one of his books called Leaders Eat Last. So he's definitely one of the people I study.
Okay, well, I'm reading his book right now. I'm almost done with it. I'm reading his book, Start with Why, and yeah, I've seen his TED Talk on that as well. And he's coming out with a book at the end of the year about the infinite game versus the finite game, game theory in business as related to business, which I'm really interested in. So, but he talks about the golden circle. So he talks about the internal circle is why. It's your feelings. It's your motivations, your values, your beliefs, all these things that are intangible about your business and about why you do what you do. And then he talks about, then you discuss how you do what you do, and then you discuss what it is that you do. So we're kind of taking this backwards with your story, but I would like to get into the why. Like, why, number one, why do you find it important to do what you do? Why is it that people should really consider looking at what you do as being beneficial to them? And you've touched on it a little bit. And just like why are you so motivated all the time?
Well, that's a very good question. I appreciate that. We are always trying to define our whys, even amongst our peers in the office, because it really is what drives you every single morning to get up. Because, sometimes you wake up and you're like, I got to face the world today. And sometimes you wake up and like, yes, I want to face the world. I'm excited. And it really has to do with what it is you're waking up to and why it is that you're compelled to do what you're doing. So for me, there's a bunch of reasons. Number one, I too, like yourself, have had a divorce in my life, and I have an 8-year-old daughter that I love a lot, and she lives with her mom. And just because of financial constraints and other things, our marriage didn't work out. But I want to be able to provide for my daughter everything that she could ever want in this life, because I don't imagine that her mom would be able to do the same thing. So that's the first compelling reason for me. And the other reason is, like I mentioned, I come from a middle class family, but I've been personally down in the dumps before. I've been bankrupt, I've been broke, and I've had a car repossessed. And I know that you can be happy when you don't have a lot of money. You can be happy with a lot of money, but I think I'd rather be happy with a lot of money. So I never want to be broke again. That's another thing that compels me.
Yep.
But I think more on an altruistic basis, I think that just knowing the empowerment that people can have in this country particularly when they can better themselves. I mean, people are out there living quiet lives of desperation. They're literally living paycheck to paycheck, up to their ears in debt, have no money saved, and they don't know what they do. So they're looking at, not to bring politics too much into this, but they're looking at leaders in Washington or, where I'm from in Illinois, they're looking at leaders in Springfield. And I firmly believe that none of those people will help any individual at all. And so if I can help someone better their lives and give them that sense of hope that they can empower themselves, then that really makes me feel good. I really believe that it starts just on a grassroots level. You get one family to better themselves so they can feel more hopeful, more prosperous, and then they can either build a legacy or they can pass it on to the people that they love, their friends, their family. And that's how you really change this country, is because we're going to give them empowerment to make the decisions they need to do to live the life they want.
Yeah, I was raised in a home where we were taught you don't go to government and ask for things. You just don't do it. That's not the way we live our lives. But part of the responsibility that my family took on by living that way was that we felt responsible for each other. So when it came to a point where if you needed a hand up to keep you afloat, there was always family there to help you any way they absolutely could. So when I started this podcast, it was I was thinking because not only my full-time job driving a truck, I'm gone a lot. I don't have a lot of time with my kids, and my kids are getting older. My oldest son is 20. So I'm looking at what is it that I can produce that will help that generation, because I see that generation as everything's changing, and the school system is set up for the old way of life. It's set up for the industrial age, and we've entered a completely different age. So I want to talk to people that can give these people advice and point them in the right direction and motivate them and inspire them to say, hey, look, I don't have to look at this old way of doing things as the only way out. And so this is kind of my way of giving a hand up to as many people as will take the time to listen, as long as they take the time to listen, and I can keep getting really interesting guests like yourself on who are willing to share valuable information, then like this is the best I can do for anybody. And technology has made it really incredible that somebody like me can get their voice out there to where people all around the world can hear you and hear your story, hear what you have to say, can disagree with you, can agree with you, can pull little nuggets out of any advice that you may have to give, and it doesn't matter where they're from, and I think that's really remarkable that we have this opportunity today. And I talk to every guest about this. With what you do, how have you seen technology change your ability to reach people, your ability to help people, and people's ability to take better control of their lives and their finances in today's society?
Well, that's a good question. I actually gave a talk the other day in my office about how these cell phones that we have in our lives, really, I can run my whole business in the power of my hand. Literally, 10 years ago, they weren't that strong, they weren't that powerful. But now you can do podcasting, you can do video recording, you can do everything on the phone. Just in my industry alone, in the time I've been there, it's been remarkable as far as now we have the ability to actually give presentations. We can actually build organizations across the country, so we don't have to necessarily be face-to-face anymore. But I'm the kind of guy who, despite knowing that in the financial industry there's tons of paperwork, the technology behind making everything online and just being able to push a button and knowing that, if you know what paperwork is in certain companies, sometimes when you make a mistake, you have to go back and talk to the client and say, oh, I forgot you to sign this part, or, I didn't mark this X right here in this little box. And it can be a big headache. And so technology alone says, okay, there's a bunch of red X's on this computer screen, and I have to make sure everything turns green before I know that the thing is done, and I never have to worry about chasing you down because I missed something. So that's a big change right there. I just think that, it's certainly helped influence a lot of things in the world of business. Although I'm still cautious of how money is transacted electronically. I got to be honest, I don't know much about Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. It's definitely intriguing to me. Mm-hmm. But, just little ones and zeros, manipulating the financial world, I'm a little apprehensive about that. But technology certainly does make things easier.
Well, a little side note on that. Tune in to the first podcast in November. Paul McNeil, I had interviewed him in August, and I'm finally getting to release that podcast, and that's his expertise. is cryptocurrencies. So he's
Awesome.
yeah. Your brother will be popping up here on the 28th. So.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. So that was just a little side note for you to keep your eyes open.
Okay.
But whenever it comes to, okay, I know there are laws and regulations that you're bound to, that there are certain things we can't talk about and you're not allowed to discuss publicly for different legal reasons. So with what you can discuss, as far as much detail as you can get into, how do you help somebody? How do you walk somebody through their finances, and how do you help them better prepare themselves? If there were, like, let's say there were 5 things that every listener to this program needed to know, what are those 5 things, or 10 things, or whatever? I'm not going to put a specific number on it, but if there were these are the things you must do in order to better your financial situation.
Absolutely. Another reason why I call myself a prosperity coach, because when it comes, I do a lot of recruiting and team building, and what I find is that when I tell people that, I work in financial services, somehow they think that you need a lot of degrees. You have to be practically a rocket science to understand how money works. And I tell them it's very simple. The first law of money is don't spend more than you make. And so that right there alone can save a lot of people, because we live in a world of people get tempted and get influenced to make purchases all the time. And you see these commercials about credit cards, and they talk about how things are precious and costless, don't cost anything. And going on vacation, or getting that new car, or buying that nice house, or I have to get a boat because my next door neighbors did. And people are quickly influenced by their surroundings, and so they just want to keep up with the Joneses, right? And so I think that don't spend more than you make is one of the first rules. The other rule is people don't really understand how interest works. One of the things I thought was awesome, I don't know if you've ever heard, Tommy, of what they call the Rule of 72.
Mm-mm.
Now, so the Rule of 72, this is one of the things that I teach quite frequently in my presentations. It's the law of compound interest. And Albert Einstein actually came up with this formula some time back, and he said that if you take the amount of interest that your money is either getting when you're growing your money, or it can work against you in debt, but if you take that interest rate and you divide it into 72, it literally will tell you how long it takes to have that money double. So, for example, if you're saving money, and we know that the bank doesn't pay much interest, you might get 1%, if that, at a bank, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you think about that, 1 goes into 72 times, which means that your money is doubling every 72 years, just keeping it in the bank.
Cool.
And if you think about the law of inflation at best is 3%, right? Mm-hmm. And inflation means that things are getting more expensive every single year. Now, 3 goes into 72 24 times, which means that your debt or your money is losing value every 24 years. And so if you keep your money in a bank, you're actually guaranteed to lose your money safely.
Oh, wow.
Now, however, if you were to get 4% interest on your debt, they used to have CDs that paid 4 or 5%. 4 goes into 72 18 times, so your money is doubling every 18 years. But if you were to get 8% or 10% in a good investment, now 8 goes into 72 9 times, so every 9 years your money is doubling, right? Mm-hmm. And what we want to show people is how to get 10 or 12%. Imagine if you got 12% interest on your money, that goes into 72 6 times. That means that your money is doubling every 6 years. And so some of the examples that we use is if you had $10,000 when you were 29 and you were getting 12%, that means that by the time that you were 65, you'd have $640,000 in that account, and that's not even putting any more money in there. That's just doubling every 6 years because of the interest rate you're getting.
Right.
On the reverse, if your credit card is 18% interest, that means that your debt is doubling every 4 years. So people are often backwards in where they're putting their money and where their debts are.
Yeah, and this boils down to, this goes back to the I guess we can tie that to like the Federal Reserve, and it's something we've been hearing in the news here recently with Trump talking about the Fed pushing up interest rates, and I was actually kind of excited to hear them finally actually increasing interest rates, because I was like, the savings in this country is minimal. It's almost non-existent nowadays, because people are spending their money because they're completely aware that putting it in a bank and saving it's not doing them any good. So we need higher interest rates at some point.
Well, so I will say this with a caution. I'm not an economics professor. I do study the Austrian School of Economics, and I love the book that Ron Paul put out, End of Fed. And I actually read a greater in-depth book regarding the Federal Reserve. It's called The Creature from Jekyll Island, which just opened my eyes to the awful monster that the Federal Reserve really is. But I think that
have you read
conspiracy theory that.
Have you read Choice by Bob Murphy?
I have not read that yet. I heard Tom Woods show talking about that.
Yeah, it's kind of like a easier version of Human Action. It's or like a prequel to Human Action. It's like if you go through and read Choice, and he puts a lot of things in perspective. To how a laissez-faire system would work without, government intervention and this and the other. It's really good. And Hazlitt had that book that he released, who knows how long ago, called Economics in One Lesson. This isn't the first time that book title's come up on this podcast, but that's a really good one. That's one that I read at least once a year. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so keeps you fresh, keeps you on your toes.
Absolutely. And the biggest problem is in this country that they don't really teach how money works in school. There's really, to my knowledge, there's only 4 states in the whole country that actually offer 1 semester of financial education in high school. Mm-hmm. I remember I took an economics class in high school, and they taught us how to balance the checkbook, and they might have gone over quickly the difference between stocks and bonds. But I mean, in today's world, people hardly balance checkbooks anymore. Everything's on a computer, and most people don't know how money works. That's why they get into debt right away. They get out of high school, and the first thing they do is they apply for college, and all of a sudden they're strapped with student loans. And you can have hundreds of thousands of dollars just in student loans. And when you get out of college and you find a job making 40 or 50 grand a year, that's not going to cut it.
Yeah. All right. Well, we kind of veered off here. We get talking about economics and stuff like that, and we start talking about all kinds of stuff. But okay, so we got two rules so far. Don't spend more than you earn, and learn how compound interest works. The rule of 72. Where else would you go from there that people just must knows?
Well, I think it's just. Really, in the 6 steps, we provide what we call a roadmap with our company, and the first 2 are obviously cash flow and figuring out how to manage your budget and doing that stuff, and then finding your way to pay off debts as quick as possible. Those are 2 most important, because I think that's the number one thing that's struggling people is I need to have more money to be able to even save any money.
Right.
And so there are things that you can do in that regard, because I think 90% of America, right, they have a problem with not making enough money. So let's figure out how to put more cash in their pocket by budgeting their money and getting out of debt. And then, just teaching somebody how to properly set up an emergency fund. Most people use their credit card for emergencies, and really, I use a mutual fund-based strategy where you can actually you're paying a small management fee for a manager who can make decisions for you, but you don't want to put that kind of money in something that's really risky. You can do a lot of types of accounts and just have that money liquid and available to you. I think a lot of times people don't understand some of the insurances that are out there. They're getting insurance from commercials with the lizard and the caveman and stuff like that, but they might think that they might think that they have some kind of insurance plan, but they don't really know what it is or what they do. I've actually sat down with a client, and they think that, yeah, they're set up, but they have life insurance. If they were to pass away, they have a $500,000 policy. And I literally sat down with a client, and they showed me their policy, and it's an accident and dismemberment policy. So they only would pay out if that person died in a car accident or something like that. But if the person had a heart attack, that family would be devastated. And so just understanding the difference between term insurance and permanent insurance is a big factor in exactly how that whole thing works.
Right, and that's not to demean the AD&D policies, the accidental death and dismemberment policies, are absolutely crucial for some people that do have higher risk jobs and things like me being a truck driver. I absolutely have to have that kind of policy. And actually, most trucking companies provide you with a policy of AD&D. But beyond that, yeah, you definitely need. What if you die of a natural causes? And you're not covered. Your family's not covered. Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I'm definitely looking at reinvesting in here in the next couple of years. I really need to get on that life insurance. Get me a good life insurance policy put in place. I had let my other one. I had left my job and I just never re-upped and got another one. So that's something I definitely need to do. Now, one of the things that my wife and I are doing, okay, a little background there. This is my third marriage, so I'm not still married to the other one. She moved here from South Africa, right? And that's obviously their economy has been destroyed over the last 20 some odd years, and they've actually dropped in status from first world status to third world status. But so she didn't have a lot of money, coming over here. And actually, excuse me, 1 second. The amount of money she made over there, where it sounds like it was a lot of money, from their terms, whenever you adjust it to U.S. dollars, it was less. It was right around $1,000 a month is what she was living on. And so she didn't have a lot of money when she came over here. I obviously, like I told you a little bit about my story, and it's not until here in the last few years that I've gotten into a situation to where I have a little bit of a cushion with the amount of money I make and this, that, and the other. So what we've done is because I didn't have a retirement plan and I didn't have all this stuff and I always just told myself, all right, well, because of the situations and the decisions I'm having to make and that I feel like I have to make, obviously there were other choices, but I made these decisions in a specific way. And I kind of bargained with myself. That's how I always put it. I bargained with my future. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this for so long. And then when I hit a specific point in my life, when my kids start getting up in age and I'm starting to pay less in child support and this, that, and the other, then I'm going to turn around and I'm going to create my own business. So I took kind of like that idea of extreme ownership and said, I'm not going to set aside $10, $15 a month or whatever today and what I'm going to do is come the future, I'm going to just dedicate everything I have into creating some sort of financial stability. So we've gotten to that point. So what we've decided to do, and I'm just curious as your input on this. So what we've been doing, instead of investing in like the like stocks or mutual funds or IRAs or whatever, what we've started doing is we're investing in education. So we're both enrolled in courses, learning different styles of business. I read a lot. I buy like 2 books a month, right now I'm reading a book by Bob Bly. I'm almost done with that, Start With Why. And so I'm just absorbing as much information as I can in order to kick off my own company and invest all my money, all my extra monies back into ourselves and trusting in ourselves to create the future that we want. When it comes to that type of strategy, what would you say to that?
I think it's a great strategy. In fact, money really just grow. You can make money two different ways. You can have money work for itself, and as you mentioned earlier, you can enslave your money to work for you, or you can have people work for you. So if you're understanding and learning business, that's how you become wealthy. And so as part of being a prosperity coach is teaching people not just how money works, because there's only so much money that you have a capacity of making depending on what line of work that you're in. I always encourage people that in this country, if you can have some kind of business that you can actually make, even if it's on the side of what you're currently doing. If you have a second business, or they call them side hustles now, and if you can turn that into a full-time business, that's great. But even having that in a changing economy, bettering yourself, as Jason always talks about, increasing your human capacity or your human capital is the way to go.
Yeah, and that's always kind of been my vision, and I've meddled in different things here and there, and this, that, and the other. But as I was getting older, and we just kind of we just put it all on the line here recently. My wife's starting a virtual assistant business, and I'm studying copywriting is what I'm studying, because I like writing so much. And so what I want to do is I want to turn that creative side of me and that ability I have to express myself in words, and I want to be able to turn that into to income. I'm like, I have a talent, and it's always been something I did. I've always written, and whether it's poetry or short stories or whatever, I've always done it. So I was just like, it's something I love to do. Like, why can't I make money doing it? So that's one of the things I'm studying at the moment, and becoming freelancer and doing things like that. Is there anything else? We've been on for about an hour, and I usually try to keep it close to an hour, even though I'm not always successful. Is there anything else that you think is just a must that people must know?
I think you hit the nail on the head when it just comes to enhancing your personal knowledge. Mm. One of the things that you have to be cautious of is who you're taking advice from. There's a lot of TV personalities, radio hosts, and authors out there who have been successful and teach good principles, but sometimes they say things. I'm not going to name anybody. Obviously, it wouldn't be proper or professional, but sometimes you might get somebody who says that this type of policy is not good for you, and they may not even be licensed properly to understand how it works. And so I think that you have to be cautious who you take advice from. I would always say you should never take advice from people who are less successful than you are, no matter what field that's in. And just educate yourself, because we're not learning about it in school, and that's the big tragedy right there. And if you come across somebody who you like their energy, you like you like what they're saying, and they have a proven track record, then I would probably follow them. There's never any lack of growing in this world. There's never any lack of information that you can possibly have. And as money changes and programs change, stocks change, bonds change, life insurance, all that stuff will change. Having a head up and knowing about these things, or having somebody that you can trust as an advisor to let you aware of these kind of things is just to your benefit.
Yeah. Okay, so as we're closing down here, what I want to do is I want to give you an opportunity. Tell people where to find you. Your business website, like your email, whatever you want to give out. Tell them where to find you and how to contact you, how to get in touch with you, so that they can move forward in helping themselves.
Okay, well, you can find me on most of the social media platforms. I'm on Instagram as MW Korbel. I'm on Facebook as Mike Korbel, LinkedIn, And I'm going to be starting a YouTube channel here shortly. In fact, I just got some new technology to help me start doing that.
Nice.
So just look for my name, Mike Korbel, and it's mostly on social media. I've got links to my company website. I didn't design it myself. It's actually part of the corporation. But wfgconnects.com/Michael Korbel. That's where you can find my personal website for my work. Just find me on social media, and I welcome all people who want to send me an email or send me a connect on social media, and we'll just go from there.
That sounds great, Michael. If you'll hold on 1 second, man, let me just close down the recording, and then I got a couple of things I want to talk to you about after all said and done.
You bet.
All right, guys. Thank y'all for tuning in. This has been Stranger Encounters with Michael Korbel. I'm Tommy Salmons. Late.
Tearing deep within my skin, faded eyes can't see true evil within me, broken mirror of my life.